For years, our little condo complex in Woodstock, Georgia, had lived under the shadow of a board that specialized in one word: no. Want to add a flower box outside your window? No. Want to paint your front door a slightly different shade of beige? No. Want to install a satellite dish so you can actually watch the football games you pay for? Absolutely not. It didn't matter how reasonable the request was. The answer was always the same. People stopped asking. The culture of the community hardened into resignation. You paid your dues, kept your head down, and prayed the board didn't notice you. That changed 2 years ago. A new group of us decided we'd had enough. We ran for election, promising to say yes more often, to be practical instead of petty. We didn't want to turn the place into chaos. We just wanted to treat people like adults. If something was safe, legal, and didn't bankrupt the HOA, why not allow it? I became secretary, and from the first meeting with the new board, the air felt lighter. We repealed outdated restrictions. We allowed modest improvements. We approved landscaping projects residents had begged for years earlier. For the first time, condo living felt less like a prison and more like, well, living. But every wave of progress meets a rock eventually. For us, that rock was emergency generators. The idea surfaced during a stormy board meeting in late summer. The rain lashed against the clubhouse windows, thunder rattled the roof, and the lights flickered twice before steadying. It felt like an omen. Linda, one of the newer board members, spoke first. What happens if they go out completely? We have residents with medical equipment, CPAP machines, oxygen concentrators, refrigerated medications. A battery pack lasts a day at most. If the power stays down, people's lives are at risk. The room went quiet. She was right. In the last 5 years, Georgia had suffered its share of storms that left neighborhoods dark for days. Add in the specter of terrorism, aging infrastructure, and extreme weather, and the question wasn't if but when we'd face an extended outage. The proposal was simple in theory: allow residents to use backup generators. Some would want portable models they could roll into their driveways. Others might prefer permanent, whole home systems like Generac. But theory and reality rarely match in condo living. Greg, our treasurer, was the first to raise objections. Generators are noisy. Imagine 48 units running them all night. It'll sound like a construction zone. We can set hours, Linda countered. Or require noise mitigation enclosures. Fumes, Greg pressed. Carbon monoxide. If someone installs one too close to a window, we're liable. Not if we make them sign a liability waiver, Linda said quickly. All eyes turned to me, the note-taker, the detail wrangler. I was already scribbling ideas. Distance from structures. Manufacturer's instructions. Limited hours of operation. Mandatory maintenance. Signed obligations and indemnity forms. The discussion rolled on. Some residents had come to watch, and they chimed in too. I'd feel safer knowing I could keep my insulin cold, one woman said. My father's oxygen machine can't run on a battery forever, another added. But then came the skeptics. Generators are ugly. They'll ruin the look of the property. I don't want to hear engines rumbling outside my window all night. If one person does it wrong and burns the place down, we all pay. It was a microcosm of condo politics. Compassion on one side, fear on the other, and a narrow strip of practicality somewhere in the middle. I went home that night with a heavy binder of sample guidelines from other associations. Most were restrictive to the point of absurdity. Noise limits that effectively banned use after 6 p.m., setback requirements impossible on small lots, approval processes longer than some natural disasters lasted. I sat at my kitchen table, flipping through pages, the rain still pounding outside. What struck me wasn't the rules themselves but the philosophy behind them. Each guideline dripped with the same spirit of, no, we'd worked so hard to move past. Instead of helping residents prepare, the associations wrote rules that discouraged anyone from trying. Was that really the best we could do? The next morning, I drafted a preliminary outline. It wasn't perfect, but it felt fair. 1. Operation must follow manufacturer instructions. 2. Minimum distance from buildings. 5 feet for portable, 10 feet for permanent. 3. Noise mitigation required. Enclosures or mufflers. 4. Permitted hours. 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., unless medical necessity. 5. Responsibility. Owner must sign a letter of obligation, assuming liability for safe use and holding the HOA harmless. 6. Approval process. Streamlined, requiring only proof of installation compliance, not endless bureaucracy. I sent the draft to the board with a note. This is a start. Let's build something reasonable, not just another list of ways to say no. Within an hour, my phone buzzed with replies. Linda. Love it. Residents will appreciate this. Greg. Too lenient. Need stricter hours. What if people run them all night? Marcy, our president, we'll need legal review, but this is promising. Thank you. And then Jim, the skeptic of skeptics, replied with just one line. Generators are a terrible idea. Drop it. That evening, I walked the property. The storm had passed, leaving branches scattered across the lawn. In the fading light, I imagined the hum of generators dotted around the complex, lights glowing inside while the world outside was dark. I thought of Mrs. Johnson in Unit 12, who relied on oxygen every night. Of the Smiths in Unit 27, who had a newborn. Of my own father, who'd lived through outages that forced him to sleep in a freezing house. I didn't just want guidelines. I wanted security, for everyone. But I also knew, guidelines that nobody could agree on would be as useless as no guidelines at all. And so the question lingered. Could we find a path between compassion and control? Or would generators become the next battle that tore our fragile, yes board, back into the old culture of, no? By the time we convened our next board meeting, the storm had long passed, but the storm over generators had only just begun. The clubhouse was fuller than usual. Word had spread that the new board was considering a radical departure from tradition, allowing equipment that previous boards would have banned without hesitation. Residents filled every chair, some standing along the back wall. The air smelled faintly of coffee and tension. Marcy, our president, opened the meeting with her calm, teacherly voice. Tonight's agenda includes preliminary discussion of generator guidelines. No votes will be taken, but input will be heard. That was the cue. Linda leaned forward immediately, enthusiasm radiating. I believe this is a common sense proposal. We live in a part of Georgia where storms and outages aren't rare. We have older residents, people with medical needs. Portable generators, properly regulated, could literally save lives. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. A man in the back shouted, "Damn right. I've got sleep apnea. Try using a CPAP without power." Greg, ever the pragmatist, lifted his folder. We mustn't romanticize this. Generators are loud. They produce exhaust. One poorly placed machine could send carbon monoxide into someone's window. We're not just talking convenience, we're talking liability. Which is why, Linda cut in, we require owners to sign obligations and waivers. You can't legislate away stupidity, but you can limit the HOA's exposure. At that, a resident raised her hand timidly. Mrs. Johnson, silver hair pulled back neatly, oxygen tubes visible beneath her nose. I support the idea, she said softly, her voice trembling. If the power goes out, I can last maybe 6 hours before my machine quits. Last winter, when the grid failed for 2 days, I thought I wouldn't make it. If you can help me stay in my own home safely, why wouldn't you? The room fell quiet. For a moment, compassion won. But Jim wasn't swayed. He slammed his palm against the table. Because condos are not single-family homes. That's why. Shared walls, shared air, shared liabilities. You can't just pretend this is Woodstock suburbia where everyone does what they want in their yard. Boos and groans echoed, but Jim pressed on. Generators will make this place sound like a truck stop. And don't talk to me about waivers. If someone dies from fumes, the HOA still gets dragged into court. Waivers don't resurrect the dead. Marcy tapped her gavel lightly. Let's keep voices civil. But civil was long gone. I cleared my throat, trying to bring the focus back to facts. I've drafted guidelines that balance safety and practicality. Distances from structures, noise enclosures, hours of operation, medical exceptions. I'm not saying we approve chaos, I'm saying we approve responsibility. Some nods, some crossed arms. The divide was clear. Those who feared danger more than blackout, and those who feared blackout more than danger. Halfway through, our property manager, Ellen, rose with a folder. I've spoken with our association's attorney. She flagged several concerns. First, the waiver of liability isn't bulletproof. Courts sometimes disregard them if negligence is proven. Second, the board itself could be accused of negligence if it knowingly allows unsafe practices. Third, the bylaws don't currently mention generators at all. We'd likely need an amendment or at least a formal policy adoption with proper notice. The room buzzed with nervous energy. Legalese always cast a long shadow. So what are you saying? Greg asked. Ellen shrugged. That if you go forward, tread carefully. Get the lawyer to draft final language. Make it clear, enforceable, defensible. Otherwise, you're gambling. Jim seized the moment. There it is. Proof we're walking into liability. Do you want to pay higher dues because someone ran a generator wrong? Because that's where this ends. But Linda refused to yield. And what about dues when people are forced to relocate in an outage? Hotels, temporary housing, lawsuits from residents who can't use medical devices. Doing nothing is also a liability. For once, the audience applauded. The debate dragged on, voices rising, tempers flaring. One resident shouted, "I'll buy my own damn generator whether you allow it or not." Another shot back, "And if your fumes kill my kids, I'll sue you myself." The clubhouse was turning into a courtroom without a judge. Marcy finally stood, her gavel loud and sharp. Enough. This board promised to be open to ideas. That means we don't kill proposals before they're explored. Tonight, we're not voting. Tonight, we're listening. And what I hear is fear, on both sides. Fear of blackouts. Fear of danger. Fear of liability. None of that disappears if we bury our heads in the sand. She paused, letting the words sink in. So here's the next step. We send the draft to the lawyer. We request case studies from other associations. And at the next meeting, we review with facts, not just fears. As people filtered out, I caught snippets of conversation. This is madness. No, it's progress. They'll bankrupt us. They'll save us. In the parking lot, generators weren't just machines anymore. They were symbols of independence, of fear, of risk, of compassion. That night, I sat at my desk, the draft guidelines glowing on my laptop screen. I added a new section. 7. Board retains the right to revoke approval if unsafe use is documented. It felt like a compromise, a lifeline between extremes. But deep down, I knew compromise wasn't enough. Because when the next storm came, nobody would care about guidelines. They'd care about light, heat, breath. And if we failed to act, the only sound louder than the storm would be the silence of machines that weren't allowed to run. 2 weeks later, Ellen, our property manager, walked into the boardroom with a manila envelope tucked under her arm. She didn't even sit before dropping it on the table. From the attorney, she said. Marcy slid the papers out, scanning the cover letter. Then she sighed, passing copies around. I took one. The words were as dry as toast, but they carried weight. Generators are permissible under Georgia law provided local ordinances are met. HOA boards may regulate use but cannot delegate liability entirely to owners. Noise ordinances must be respected. Clear written guidelines must be adopted and distributed. And then the line that made the whole room stiffen. Failure to enforce consistently may expose the association to claims of selective enforcement. Jim practically leapt from his chair. You see? Once we allow one generator, we have to allow them all. And if one person complains we're being unfair, boom, lawsuit. This is Pandora's box. Linda rolled her eyes. Or it's a lifeline. The lawyer isn't saying, don't do it. She's saying, do it carefully. That's what guidelines are for. The audience that night was bigger than usual. Word had gotten around about the attorney's report. People whispered as we debated. Greg cleared his throat. We've got 3 options. Prohibit outright, approve conditionally, or punt the issue until a crisis forces our hand. Option 1 is cowardice, Linda snapped. Option 2 is liability, Jim countered. Option 3 is negligence, I said. The silence afterward was heavy, like we'd all just admitted there was no safe ground left. Marcy finally spoke. I think we owe residents a draft. Something concrete, something they can respond to. Let's stop talking in circles. So I opened my laptop and pulled up my outline. The big screen flickered on, displaying the bulleted list we'd crafted. As I read each point, the room responded in a chorus of groans, cheers, and arguments. Distance requirements. 10 feet? My lot's not even that wide. Tough. Safety comes first. Noise mitigation. Have you ever priced an enclosure? They cost more than the generator. Then don't buy one if you can't afford to use it responsibly. Hours of operation. Cutting power at 10 p.m.? What about insulin refrigeration overnight? Medical exceptions are in the draft. Read it. Liability waiver. That won't hold up in court. Then at least it proves intent. Every clause was a battlefield. Then came the real flashpoint, permanent generators. One man stood up, red-faced. So let me get this straight. My neighbor can install a big ugly Generac, bolt it to the ground, and we all get to hear it hum for hours. No way. Not in a condo. A woman shot back, and what if that generator keeps my ventilator running when Georgia Power leaves us in the dark? Would you rather I died quietly so you can enjoy silence? The room erupted. Shouts, insults, fists pounding chairs. Greg shouted for order, but it was chaos. Finally, Marcy banged her gavel until the sound cut through. Enough. We are not enemies. We are neighbors. We will not turn this into war. But it already felt like war. Jim stood, clutching the attorney's letter like a shield. The lawyer made it clear. Once we allow, we own the risk. If something goes wrong, the HOA pays. Every single one of you pays. Do you want higher dues? Because this is how you get higher dues. Linda countered, voice sharp as glass. And if we forbid it, we own the deaths. Do you want lawsuits when someone sues us for negligence because we refused to allow life-saving equipment? Because this is how you get that. The silence after that was worse than the shouting. After the meeting, clusters of residents lingered in the parking lot, debating under the glow of street lamps. I overheard fragments as I walked to my car. They'll never get it passed. I'll move if they don't. This is about freedom. This is about survival. I drove home with my stomach in knots. The guidelines I'd drafted felt less like a solution and more like a wedge splitting us apart. The next morning, my inbox exploded. Half the emails demanded immediate adoption of the rules. They quoted stories of seniors trapped in powerless homes, of refrigerated medicines spoiled, of family members who'd suffered through outages. The other half demanded an outright ban. They warned of noise pollution, property values dropping, the smell of gas, and the HOA being sued into bankruptcy. And buried among them all was a single anonymous message. If you push this through, we'll recall the board. That night, I sat staring at the draft. My cursor blinked on the page like a silent metronome. We had started with a promise to say yes, to be reasonable, flexible, humane. But here was a problem where, yes, could be dangerous, and, no, could be deadly. The legal lens hadn't clarified the issue. It had only sharpened the stakes. We weren't writing rules anymore. We were deciding who got to breathe when the lights went out. It happened on a humid Saturday evening in July. The kind of Georgia night where the air itself feels thick, heavy, electric. The cicadas screamed, thunder rumbled in the distance, and the horizon flickered with silent lightning. Then, at exactly 8:47 p.m., the power died. The building plunged into darkness. Air conditioners coughed and fell silent. Refrigerators clicked off. The elevator froze mid-ride. Emergency lights blinked weakly in the hallways before sputtering out. I opened my front door and stepped into the corridor. Neighbors were already spilling out of their units, flashlights in hand, cell phones glowing. "What's going on?" someone shouted. "Storm knocked it out," another guessed. "Georgia Power said it could be 2 days," a woman's voice trembled. 2 days. The very scenario we'd argued about for months was here. And we had no plan. By midnight, the heat was unbearable. Without AC, units turned into ovens. On the 4th floor, Mrs. Johnson struggled to breathe, her oxygen machine dead. A neighbor fanned her with a magazine, sweat pouring down his face. Families gathered in hallways, trying to catch a breeze from open stairwells. Children cried, restless in the sticky air. The faint glow of cell phones lit desperate faces. And then came the sound, the low, mechanical growl of engines. Generators. Not approved, not regulated, not legal under our rules. But already humming in the parking lot. I rushed outside. 3 residents had dragged portable units into their driveways. Extension cords snaked into windows. Gasoline cans sat open on the pavement. The fumes hit me like a wall. Jim was already there, red-faced and shouting. "Shut them down. You're endangering the entire complex. Carbon monoxide, fire hazards." One of the generator owners shouted back, "Go to hell, Jim. My wife's insulin will spoil without this." Another yelled, "My kid's asthma machine needs power. Are you gonna tell him to stop breathing?" The engines roared louder, drowning out the argument. I pulled Jim aside. "Stop screaming. They won't listen. We need order." "Order?" he spat. "They're breaking the law. They're trying to survive," I said quietly. For once, Jim had no comeback. By morning, the building was divided. Half the residents demanded the board shut the generators down immediately. "It's unsafe. It's against the bylaws. You'll burn us all alive." The other half defended them fiercely. "What choice do we have? You want to watch seniors suffocate while you quote rules?" Tempers flared. Threats were made. Neighbors who had once shared holiday meals now cursed each other across the courtyard. The smell of gasoline clung to the air. The hum of engines filled the silence where our air conditioners used to be. At an emergency board meeting called that afternoon, the clubhouse was a pressure cooker. Marcy looked exhausted, sweat glistening on her forehead. "The situation is untenable. People need power. People need safety. Right now, we have neither." Greg fanned himself with a folder. "We can't enforce a ban in the middle of an outage. It'll be chaos." Linda leaned forward, fierce. "Then we allow temporary use. Right now. Draft emergency rules. Distance from windows, no overnight operation indoors, and mandatory shutoff intervals. Otherwise, someone will die." Jim slammed the table. "And if someone already dies from fumes, who gets sued? Us. You. Me. Do you want that on your conscience?" Linda shot back, "Do you want Mrs. Johnson's death on yours?" The room gasped. The debate spiraled into shouts. Residents pounded on tables, demanding answers. We don't care about lawsuits. We care about living through tonight. Generators are dangerous. Silence is dangerous. Greg tried to bang his gavel, but the sound was lost in the roar. Finally, I stood, voice cracking. Listen, we cannot stop what's already happening. The generators are running, so either we write emergency rules right now, or we leave everyone in chaos. Silence. All eyes on me. Marcy took a deep breath. Then we vote. Emergency authorization of temporary generator use under strict guidelines. Hands went up, Linda and I in favor, Greg hesitating before joining. Jim and one ally against. 3-2. Motion carried. That evening, we posted emergency notices on every door. Temporary generator use permitted. Must be outdoors, minimum 10 feet from building. Must be turned off indoors after 10 p.m., except for medical necessity. Gasoline storage indoors prohibited. Owner assumes all responsibility for safety. The flyers looked amateurish, rushed, but they were something. And for the first time in 24 hours, there was a flicker of calm. The outage lasted 36 hours. Long enough for tempers to boil, for refrigerators to reek, for seniors to cry with relief when their machines whirred back to life. When the power finally returned, cheers echoed through the halls. Lights flickered on, AC units roared back, and life staggered toward normalcy. But the damage was done. Some residents praised us for saving lives. Others accused us of selling out safety. The emergency rules were seen as either heroic or cowardly, depending on which side you asked. Jim looked at me after the lights came back, eyes hard. This isn't over. You just legitimized anarchy. I stared back. No, Jim, we just survived. But deep down, I knew he was right about one thing. The fight had only just begun. When the power came back, the building sighed in relief. Air conditioners purred, refrigerators hummed, lights glowed in windows. Life resumed its familiar rhythm. But the relief didn't last. Within a week, petitions started circulating. One demanded permanent approval of generators, citing the blackout as proof of necessity. Another demanded a permanent ban, warning that the temporary chaos had nearly burned the complex down. By the next board meeting, those petitions sat in front of us like rival armies' flags. One had 30 signatures, the other 25. Our condo had 48 units. The community was split right down the middle. Marcy opened the meeting cautiously. Tonight, we revisit the generator issue. The emergency rules are expired. We must decide on permanent policy. The room erupted before she finished the sentence. Approve them now, someone shouted. Ban them forever, another countered. This isn't optional. People will die without them. They'll kill us all with fumes. The shouting rose. Fists pounded on tables, faces flushed red. The blackout had burned more than fuel. It had burned trust. Linda stood, voice sharp. You all lived through it. You know what it was like. Seniors gasping for air, children sweating in the dark. Generators saved lives. Without them, we'd be planning funerals. That's not exaggeration, it's reality. Applause roared from her side. Jim rose slowly, eyes blazing. And you all lived through the other side too. Gasoline cans sitting in the lot. Extension cords snaking through puddles. Noise so loud you couldn't sleep. Do you call that safety? Or do you call that negligence? Cheers answered him too. Greg tried to play mediator. We can't let this tear us apart. Maybe we craft stricter rules, permanent guidelines with professional oversight. Stricter? Linda barked. You mean impossible. Like every other law that bans in practice by regulating to death. Jim shot back. Better impossible than a lawsuit when someone keels over from carbon monoxide. Then Ellen, our property manager, stood. She held up a letter. This is from the attorney. She says the board must act. Doing nothing invites selective enforcement claims. We either allow with enforceable rules, or we prohibit outright. Half measures won't survive court. The room buzzed with fear. Legal threats carried more weight than moral ones. We called for resident comments. They came like a flood. I don't care about rules, I care about my insulin not spoiling. My father can't climb stairs in the heat. He needs power. I couldn't sleep for 2 nights because of the noise. My blood pressure spiked. I smelled gas all night. My kids were terrified. Every story was true, every fear valid, and every voice hardened the divide. When the board finally recessed for deliberation, the 5 of us sat in the back room, heads in our hands. Linda, we can't prohibit. We've seen what happens. Jim, we can't allow. We've seen what happens. Greg, so what's left? Silence. Then Marcy spoke. Maybe this isn't just about generators. Maybe it's about trust. If residents don't trust each other to act responsibly, no rule will save us. I nodded slowly. Then the rule must be more than technical. It must be cultural. We must set expectations of responsibility and back them with teeth. Jim sneered. Teeth means lawsuits. Teeth means enforcement, I corrected. Inspections. Penalties for violations. Real consequences. When we returned to the main room, the noise was deafening. Marcy raised her gavel high. This board will not punt. We will not hide. Tonight we draft the bones of a permanent generator policy. Gasps. Cheers. Boos. I opened my laptop and projected the draft. The same guidelines as before, but now thicker, sharper. Distance requirements, 10 feet minimum, verified by inspection. Noise limits. Must meet county ordinance with HOA fines for violations. Fuel storage. Prohibited indoors. Medical necessity exception. Allowed overnight with doctor's note. Annual inspection. Required, paid by owner. Penalties. Fines up to $500 for violations. Repeat offenders lose approval. The room split instantly. This is dictatorship. Jim's side shouted. This is salvation. Linda's side roared back. I typed as Marcy banged the gavel again and again, her voice hoarse. Order. Order. But order was long gone. After the meeting, the clubhouse emptied into the humid night. Neighbors clustered in cliques, glaring across the courtyard. Conversations that once revolved around sports and recipes now centered on liability and lawsuits. And as I walked to my car, I realized, we hadn't just written rules. We'd written a referendum on who we were as a community. Would we be neighbors who trusted each other with dangerous responsibility? Or strangers who trusted no one, not even when the lights went out? The boardroom was packed to bursting. Residents crowded shoulder to shoulder, sweat dripping in the humid Georgia evening. The smell of gasoline still lingered in memory, even though the blackout had ended weeks earlier. Everyone knew tonight would be decisive. Marcy opened the meeting with a voice heavy from sleepless nights. This is the final agenda item. Adoption of a permanent generator policy. We've debated. We've survived an outage. We've listened to attorneys. Now we must decide. You could feel the air crackle, half anticipation, half dread. Linda was the first to speak. She stood tall, notes trembling in her hand. We lived through the blackout. We saw what happened when people had no power. Seniors gasped for air, parents begged for refrigeration, families sat in darkness. Generators saved lives. Not theories, not rumors, lives. Tonight, if we fail to approve guidelines, we condemn ourselves to chaos next time. Applause shook the walls. Jim rose immediately, face hard as stone. And I say the opposite. We also lived through the danger. Extension cords across puddles. Gasoline cans leaking. Noise so loud no one slept. Carbon monoxide in the air. That's not survival. That's Russian roulette. If you approve this policy, you gamble with every life here. And when the dice fall wrong, don't say I didn't warn you. His side cheered just as loudly. Greg tried to soften the divide. This isn't black and white. With inspections, fines, and oversight, we can minimize risks. It won't be perfect, but neither is pretending emergencies don't happen. A middle ground exists, if we're willing to enforce it. The murmurs were less enthusiastic, but some nodded. Then it was my turn. I hadn't planned to speak, but the silence pushed me up. I joined this board to say yes when yes was possible. Not reckless yes, not careless yes, but yes when it meant dignity. The blackout proved something. Rules or no rules, people will run generators. The question is, will we guide them, or abandon them to chaos? For me, the choice is clear. We lead, we regulate, we trust. A mix of cheers and boos followed. But for once, I didn't care. Marcy lifted the gavel. The motion before us. Adopt the draft generator policy as permanent association rule. All in favor? Linda's hand shot up. Mine followed. Greg hesitated, then raised his as well. All opposed? Jim and his ally raised theirs instantly. 3-2. Motion carried. The room erupted, half in relief, half in fury. Within hours, the courtyard buzzed with the aftermath. Supporters hugged, promising to buy enclosures and follow every rule. Opponents muttered darkly, already plotting petitions for recall. Neighbors who once shared potlucks now avoided eye contact. The policy was law, but peace was dead. That night, I walked the complex alone. The air was quiet, the cicadas subdued. Windows glowed softly, but I imagined them dark again, the hum of engines filling the night. Would our rules keep us safe? Or had we just written the script for the next disaster? I didn't know. What I did know was this. An HOA isn't just about property values or paint colors. It's about who we are when storms hit, when the grid fails, when fear collides with survival. Some saw generators as salvation, others as threat. Both were right, in their way. The real danger wasn't noise or fumes. It was mistrust. Because when neighbors stop trusting each other, no generator in the world can keep the lights on.
Thanks for watching this story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more unbelievable HOA stories. Have you ever dealt with something this absurd in your own neighborhood? Share your experience in the comments below. I'd love to read your stories. And as always, stay tuned for the next episode.